up guys, Merganman4 here, and with Doctor Who's 60th anniversary just around the corner, I thought now would be the perfect time to celebrate some of the best this franchise has to offer. From now until the 60th, I'll be back every week with a new Top 10. Now we've reached the iconic 4th Doctor, who defined Doctor Who for generations of fans and whose success has rarely been replicated. So put on your scarves and grab a bag of jelly babies as I count down my top 10 4th Doctor stories. Number 10, Last of the Colophon.
Why is he taking his bandages off?
You think you can frighten me with your injuries?
Careful, Leela.
Do not fear for me. I have seen men with boiled faces before.
No, then look at me. Look at me. Look!
But there is nothing there. I can see right through you. You are nothing.
The 4th Doctor's era has often taken inspiration from classic monster stories. Frankenstein? Check. The Mummy? Check. With Last of the Colophon, it's the turn of the Invisible Man, as the Doctor and Leela arrive on a dead world with just one survivor, a prisoner wrapped in bandages, waiting to be rescued. What I think works so well about this story is that things are never entirely as they seem. When we first meet this survivor, named Morax, he's a rather sympathetic figure. We know he's being imprisoned against his will, but it's framed in such a way that the jailers seem to be the villains. In reality, Morax is responsible for the extinction of his own people, and was sentenced to eternal life as punishment. We're told that Morax's bandages cover horrific injuries, but in actuality they ensure his jailers can keep an eye on him, as he developed a way to make himself invisible. It appears that he was caught in the explosion of his prison, and the story seems to end here. But just before the closing credits can come in, the Doctor realizes Morax used a recording to trick them into thinking he was still inside. It's a lot of fun, and Morax makes for a really threatening villain, and I think it's genius to pit him against Leela, whose hunting skills make her the ideal companion to tackle such a foe. I don't think this story is quite as unique or revolutionary as some of the others I'll be talking about today, but what it does do, it does extremely well, and it's a highly entertaining time. Number 9, The Crooked Man.
Hello, little man. You're joking me! So many books. Quite the reader, are you, friend? Oh, what? Such a shame. Please! Don't worry. This won't hurt a bit. No, it'll hurt a very great deal indeed.
The Crooked Man makes for a surprise sequel to one of the 2nd Doctor's most iconic stories, The Mind Robber. And as all great sequels should, it manages to expand upon the original without being a retread or diminishing what made the original so good. Indeed, The Crooked Man takes the core concept of The Mind Robber, the idea of the land of fiction, and effectively flips it around. Instead of elements of the real world being brought into the land of fiction, elements of the land of fiction are brought into the real world. And instead of iconic characters throughout fictional history, this time the focus is on obscure, little-known fictions. It's reminiscent, but feels like a completely fresh take on the source material. In particular, Neil Stuke's performance as the eponymous Crooked Man, the main villain of the piece, is magnificently unsettling, quickly proving to be a powerful foe. His methods of murder, from snapping book spines to force-feeding novel pages, are gruesomely creative and leave a striking image in the mind. This story is also a strong outing for Tom Baker, which, true, that's not exactly unusual, but you can just tell he's having a great time with the material. And the 4th Doctor's characterization strikes the perfect balance between seriousness and comedy that I sometimes feel is lacking. This is the 4th Doctor at his very best. On the whole, The Crooked Man makes for a very successful sequel, filled with creative ideas and executed in a highly effective manner. Number 8, The Trouble with Drax.
You put it back. Then he'll know it's been returned safely.
Me? I can't do that.
We can't go. This flyer's got a 2-man operating system.
Better yet, you put it back the second after it was removed. So we can pretend we was bluffing all along. I really can't do that. What, because of the laws of time? Oh, come on, Doc. We ain't just broken them today. We've smashed them, bunged them in the rubbish bin and put them out for recycling. What difference does it make?
If there's any Doctor Who story that could be described as a roller coaster, it's this one. It starts out deceptively simple, with the Doctor and Romana reunited with fellow Time Lord Drax, who wants their help with a heist. But it quickly becomes apparent that there's more to this mission than meets the eye, as it slowly dawns on them, and you the listener, that pretty much every single guest character to feature in The Trouble with Drax is in fact Drax. It's an ingenious take on a multi-Time Lord story, taking advantage of the fact that this is a Time Lord we've seen very little of, and Drax's con man nature makes for a refreshing change to some of the other Time Lord adversaries we're used to. Selfish, certainly, but not actively malicious, just out to make a quick buck. Each incarnation we encounter is fun in their own distinct way, with a series of excellent performances, and writer John Dorney takes full advantage of the comedic opportunities of the situation, going above and beyond the usual bickering between incarnations. And the twists don't even end there. As it turns out, the whole story is one big bootstrap paradox, as the device the various incarnations of Drax trick the Doctor into stealing allows the incarnations of Drax to interact with each other without any of the usual temporal consequences, which is what enables them to team up to trick the Doctor into stealing the device in the first place. Absolutely ridiculous, and one of the most creative uses of time travel in the entire franchise. The trouble with Drax is simply a blast from start to finish. Number 7, the Robots of Death.
What did you call those robots?
Creepy mechanical men.
Yes. You know, people never really lose that feeling of unease with robots. The more of them there are, the greater the unease, and of course the greater the dependence. It's a vicious circle. People can neither live with them nor exist without them.
So what happens if the Strangler is a robot?
Oh, I should think it's the end of a civilization.
The Robots of Death is Doctor Who's sci-fi take on a whodunit, and despite the answer not exactly being hard to work out, it's called the Robots of Death for a reason, it's still a wholly engaging and thrilling tale, because the mystery, while a fun vibe, is perhaps the least important aspect. One of the things that makes the Robots of Death the success it is its fantastically rich world building. The Sand Miner making for a memorable setting, and with a sizable cast of guest characters that feel wholly fleshed out, and who bounce off each other, and the series leads, in a number of fun and interesting ways. Even the robots are distinctive, with D-84 proving to be a strong character in his own right, and the designs are instantly iconic. Simple, but effective. The previously mentioned whodunit style dominates the first couple of episodes, and is an entertaining structure, but in a smart move, the story gradually transitions into a tense base under siege, while the surviving crew members try to escape the clutches of the deadly robots whilst trapped on the Sand Miner. What completes this story's streak of excellence is the teacher-student dynamic between the Fourth Doctor and the newly joined Leela. It's a fantastic relationship, and Leela's more aggressive nature compared to most other companions plays well against the aggressiveness of the crew members as they try to discover the culprit of the murders. I'm not sure this story would be as effective if Sarah Jane was still around, for example. The Robots of Death really is the perfect combination of elements. Simultaneously terrifying and tons of fun, it's not hard to see why it's been deemed an all-time classic. Number 6, City of Death.
How very curious. 2 thieves enter the Louvre gallery and come out with a bracelet. Couldn't you think of anything more interesting to steal?
Well, I just thought it was awfully pretty. A terribly unusual design. Of course, it would have been much nicer to have stolen one of the pictures, but I've tried that before and all sorts of alarms go off, which disturbs the concentration.
Yes, it would.
My dear, I don't think he's as stupid as he seems.
My dear, nobody could be as stupid as he seems.
What do I think of when I think City of Death? Personality? Charm? Charisma? Look, City of Death has a great central storyline. An alien being splintered across time, using the Mona Lisa and 6 genuine copies to fund his time travel experiments to change time, with disastrous consequences for Earth. But what really makes this story is the production itself. Would City of Death be as memorable had they not genuinely filmed in Paris? Or if the magnificent guest cast had been a different set of actors? I'm not sure it would be. For me at least, these are the first things that come to mind when asked why I love this story. The location filming lends a fantastic atmosphere to the whole production. Julian Glover brings equal parts charm and menace to scare off, and Tom Chadbourne turns what could have been a dull dunderhead into a bumbling buffoon that you can't keep your eyes off of. And of course, Tom Baker and Lalla Ward are absolutely magnetic throughout. And to top it off, I think City of Death is a strong contender for funniest Doctor Who story out there. And yes, a good chunk of that is down to the script, but I don't think it's contentious for me to suggest that the cast take gold and turn it into gold. And that's really what it comes down to for me. City of Death has such a unique feel to it that you just can't get from any other Doctor Who story. In the words of an art critic, exquisite. Absolutely exquisite. Number 5, The Seeds of Doom.
Mr. Chase, you don't understand. It's 8 foot high and it's already killed Dunbar.
I don't care who it's killed.
People are replaceable, Scorby. The crinoid is unique. It must not be damaged in any way.
Mr. Chase, I am not getting through to you.
Give it to me. Chase, try and understand one thing. The crinoid is an uncontrollable carnivore that's getting bigger and more powerful by the minute. Now, Chase! Chase!
You know, for an era renowned for its monsters, I feel like I haven't really talked about them much. Well, let me rectify that because they're definitely the star of the show in the Seeds of Doom. Feeling like a cross between The Thing and Day of the Triffids, the crinoid makes for a fantastically gruesome and seemingly unstoppable enemy, gradually infecting and engulfing humans until what was once a tiny pod becomes a beast the size of a mansion. The first two parts especially play up the horror angle, with a classic base under siege in the Arctic, setting up the story with a chilling atmosphere and a real sense of nowhere to run, before the later parts emphasize the doom in the title as the crinoid is brought to England, from whence it could take over the entire planet. It really is one of the most terrifying threats the show's produced, and it's honestly a surprise that this is their only on-screen appearance. But while the monster is certainly the star of the show, it would be remiss of me not to mention some of the superb guest casts which make up this story. Harrison Chase is a fascinatingly cold and manic villain. His obsession with plants, to the point he couldn't care less about human life, is a fascinatingly bizarre trait that ensures you won't forget him anytime soon. But perhaps even more engaging is cold-blooded henchman Scorby, whose presence is always felt whenever he's in the room, and someone whose threats you have no doubt will be followed up on. What's particularly interesting about Scorby, though, is that despite starting out as a major villain, the situation forces him to form an unlikely allyship with the Doctor and Sarah, with his selfish streak and morally grey attitudes providing an excellent foil to the two. It's not exactly a redemption, but it's an interesting take on a villain of a kind we don't often see. Scary monsters and strong character work with an excellent atmosphere and a memorable script, The Seeds of Doom has it all. Number 4, The Paradox Planet and Legacy of Death.
We cannot change what is past, but we can at least claim our inheritance.
The Xenox crystals.
And use them to reconstruct this world.
But don't you understand that's what caused the problem?
What?
If it wasn't for your sending your chronauts back in time to steal the crystals, the people of Era 14 would have been able to use them as a power source instead of fossil fuels. Do you want to know who it was that set this planet on a course of self-destruction, eh?
Yes, I want to know.
Then look in the mirror.
The Paradox Planet and Legacy of Death is a story built around a truly brilliant concept, taking the idea of a time war and bringing it down to a more human scale. A civil war between the past and the future, the descendants versus the ancestors, all about what it means to take care of one's planet and not destroying the future, or the past, for the sake of the present. The script takes full advantage of this idea, with plenty of twists and devastating revelations along the way, resulting in what is, for the second time in this list, one of the most effective uses of time travel and paradoxes in any story of the franchise. It's a vicious cycle, with the people of the future stealing resources from the past before their ancestors squander them forever, becoming the very reason said resources have been squandered, and the people of the past attempting to develop time travel in order to more effectively fight their enemy, directly enabling their enemies to discover time travel in the future and wage war against them. It's the perfect irony for a story like this. Both sides responsible for their own fates, and it's a war that's impossible to win. The only victory is in learning from the past mistakes rather than trying to change them. That alone is enough for me to sing this story's praises, but I also want to mention the leaders of the past and future factions, played brilliantly by Tom Chadbourne and Simon Rouse, both of whom turned in some of the most memorable guest performances in classic Who. Together, they serve as our viewpoint into each time period, and very effectively portray both sides' perspectives, each relatable in their own way, but also equally responsible for all the horror and the misery. It's a complex situation that's explored in very human terms, with a powerful message and brilliant execution that I won't be forgetting anytime soon. Number 3, The Ark in Space.
It's only a few million years since they crawled up out of the mud and learned to walk. Puny, defenseless bipeds. They've survived flood, famine, and plague. They've survived cosmic wars and holocausts. Now, here they are, out among the stars, waiting to begin a new life, ready to outsit eternity. They're indomitable.
The Ark in Space may be the Fourth Doctor's second story, but in many ways, it's the true debut to his era, setting up the structure of what many would consider Doctor Who's golden age. Set on the fantastically realized Nerva beacon, the arc in space effectively gives us the movie Alien about 4 years early, which is already a massive plus in my books, as Alien is one of my all-time favorite films. The monster of the piece, the Worm, makes for a suitably scary threat, and offers some fantastically grim material in the form of Noah's gradual transformation, and the growing horror as the Worm within begins to take over. It's terrifying stuff, and I think it's a strong example of when Classic Who's slower pacing is at its best. The slow build-up of the threat over the course of each episode as the situation becomes more and more dire is incredibly tense, and gives you plenty of time to soak in the menace. I'm also a fan of how, in the end, Noah is able to fight back against the Worm's influence for just long enough to save the day. It's still a tragic loss, but is a satisfying payoff, echoing the Doctor's indomitable assessment of humanity in Part 1. It's also a great showcase for the newly formed TARDIS team of the Fourth Doctor, Sarah, and Harry. Tom Baker has already settled into the role effortlessly, and his chemistry with both Elizabeth Sladen and Ian Marter is impeccable. It's honestly hard to imagine the arc in space with a different set of leads. Exhilarating, terrifying, and revitalizing for a brand new era, the arc in space is a massive success that fully deserves its place amongst the greats. Number 2, The Talons of Weng Chiang.
How can you understand the functions of a catalytic extraction chamber, Doctor? Part of a technology far beyond your time.
Simple, old-fashioned cannibalism. That machine just saves you having to chew the grizzly bits.
Much more than that. The secret of life.
Bunkum! Your so-called technology is the twisted lunacy of a scientific dark age.
What do you know of my time?
Everything.
The Talons of Weng Chiang is a bona fide classic in every sense of the word. Look at any aspect of the production, and it's immediately apparent that everyone in front of and behind the camera is at the top of their game. The production looks incredible, with the Gothic Victorian setting providing a fantastic atmosphere that Tom Baker and Louise Jameson feel right at home in, and the moody direction and stellar production design making the most of Doctor Who's limited resources. Talons also features what is, in my opinion, one of the show's greatest ever guest casts. Both Jago and Lightfoot make an immediate impression, and Christopher Benjamin and Trevor Baxter have a delightful chemistry once the duo eventually team up in the last couple episodes, a pairing that makes you desperately want more. Thank you, Big Finish. The villains of the piece are excellent too. In spite of the rightfully criticized choice to use Yellowface, John Bennett puts in a genuinely nuanced performance as Lee Sen Chang, who remains to this day one of my favorite one-off antagonists. Michael Spice's Magnus Greel is no slouch either, putting in a wonderfully demented performance as the broken, desperate husk of a war criminal from the future. A genuinely terrifying threat because he really doesn't have anything else to lose. Add on top of that a great score from Dudley Simpson and the brilliant directorial touch of David Maloney, and you get a story where every single aspect shines. It's rare to see this much talent on display at once. And before we reach my number 1 Fourth Doctor story, let's take a quick look at some honorable mentions which very nearly made the cut. The Face of Evil, The English Way of Death, The Brain of Morbius, The Deadly Assassin, Warrior's Gate. Number 1, Genesis of the Daleks.
If someone who knew the future pointed out a child to you and told you that that child would grow up totally evil, to be a ruthless dictator who would destroy millions of lives, could you then kill that child?
We're talking about the Daleks, the most evil creatures ever invented. You must destroy them. You must complete your mission for the Time Lords.
Do I have the right?
Could it ever have been anything else? Genesis of the Daleks has been consistently hailed as one of Doctor Who's all-time greatest stories, and it's rare for something with such a reputation to actually live up to the hype. But Genesis manages it effortlessly. Going back to explore the creation of the Daleks is a concept rife with opportunity. Yet, perhaps counterintuitively, this isn't really the Dalek story. It's Davros's, and rightfully so. Davros would go on to become one of the most influential characters in Doctor Who history. So much so, in fact, that he appeared in every remaining Dalek story of the classic series, and is an utterly fascinating character. A deranged mad scientist who has abandoned all morals in his determination to win the war against the Thals at any cost, even sacrificing his own people. He's genuinely terrifying, and Michael Wisher gives an electric performance. You can't keep your eyes off him, which is really tough to do when Tom Baker's in the room with you. And yet, while he's completely mad, he's also highly intelligent. He's a challenging foe to outwit, not easily fooled. It'd also be remiss of me not to mention Davros' second-in-command, Nider, the perfect character to complement Davros, and with yet another of the series' greatest ever villain performances from Peter Miles. Together, they form a fantastic duo that's rarely been matched since. And David Maloney's direction is simply superb. From the slow-motion death throes of the opening to the beautifully lit Daleks gliding through the fog, there's an abundance of rich imagery that won't soon be forgotten. Add in Dudley Simpson's simple yet utterly chilling music, and you've got the perfect recipe for an all-time classic. But what do you think? Were there any surprise inclusions? Did I leave out your top choice? Let me know what your favorite Fourth Doctor stories are down in the comments below. And with that, Merganman4, over and out, and I'll see you all next week with my top 10 Fifth Doctor stories.